At the top of his draft score for A Midsummer Night's Dream, Benjamin Britten wrote "The Wood, Dark Night." Where Shakespeare's drama of warring fairies and their human playthings opens in the human court of Theseus and Hippolyta, worldly and familiar, Britten's opera plunges us straight into the anarchic woodland kingdom of the fairies. It's a powerful shift, cutting our ties to the familiar and reassuring, and pushing us out instead into this transgressive space whose eerie beauty is so vividly captured in those strange cello glissandi that open the score. These primal musical stirrings are echoed perfectly in both Glyndebourne's own landscape and in Peter Hall's much-loved Glyndebourne production. As the music begins, Hall's wood breathes and sways with life, the first of many magical illusions that make this staging a classic that has never been out of the repertoire since its festival premiere over 40 years ago. Costumes and designs that draw both on Elizabethan fashions and the evocative illustrations of Arthur Rackham help to give the production its distinctive storybook, fairy tale quality. Elaborate wigs and prosthetics turn a chorus of small boys into uncanny woodland sprites, while, in a lengthy process repeated every night before curtain up, Titania and Oberon are meticulously transformed, layer by layer, from modern-day singers into Tudor royalty. From thick white face paint to wigs that defy gravity, enormous ruffs, endless undergarments, and some elaborate facial hair for Oberon, as well as some rather unusual ears. Even their own family would struggle to recognise the artists beneath the costumes. So we've got the costumes for Titania and Oberon and Puck through there. Shakespeare's own audience, when they were first watching Midsummer Night's Dream, what kind of costumes could they have seen and expected?
Well, in Shakespeare's time, the actors were wearing clothes much like people in the audience would have been wearing. So these to us look quite Elizabethan, of the past. But we think, based on very little evidence that survives, that people would have recognised the clothing on stage, much like they would see on the street. And at that time, clothing was very codified, so different colours, different fabrics meant specific things. So they could really read the stage in a really subconscious way to tell who was a king, who was a lower class character. It's very much a kind of fantasy world that we're seeing being created here.
It's interesting you mentioned this idea of fantasy, because obviously in Britten's music he takes inspiration from the past, particularly for this very distinct style for the fairies. Are the berries doing something similar with the costumes?
Absolutely. So what we're seeing here is this incredible fusing of past and present. So the silhouettes that we're seeing are very much Elizabethan. We have this kind of conical shaped bodice with a skirt that goes out. The kind of shape you can see here, this replicates what was called a stomacher during the early modern period, very decorative kind of in this V shape. These are called four parts historically, this sort of slit down the front. So this seems to have been made like a stage costume where everything is attached so it can be kind of whipped on and off quite straightforwardly. And Oberon here is wearing a doublet with a peas cod belly, this padded.
It really sticks out, doesn't it?
It really does. So it gives a silhouette from sort of 360 degrees. And we've also got these amazing Robato style collars, which is not quite what we would wear down the street today. They're very much of the Elizabethan period. But the fact that there's so much colour coordination here, we've got the silver fabric below with this black lace on top, these bits of ivy added and these pearl details, it's all so coordinated, tied with the incredible wigs that are worn together with these costumes. It really makes the fairies seem of a different world.
Is this proportional, is this not, or is this exaggerated in some way?
No, this is the kind of size that would have been worn. It's held up by, there's a wire framework underneath here, and Titania's here is supported by some like perspex shards. So you can't see it so much from the front, but that's what gives it this structure.
And the berries, John and Elizabeth, where do they fit into the history of sort of costume design?
Well, there was a big moment in sort of design history at the Royal Shakespeare Company during the 1960s, where there was a huge shift from what came before, which was very sort of painterly, very decorative, very sort of pictorial, picture-like sets. And what John Berry was really interested in was looking at materials and textures, creating an atmosphere rather than a specific picture of something. And we see that coming through in the costumes, in these very kind of textured, the metallic element really speaks to the Berry's approach to doing things, but also in the set design.
That seems very typical of this opera. It's not just Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, it's A Midsummer Night's Dream sort of amplified on every level.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And these costumes just really embody that, I think.
So the neckwear on both the adults and Puck is quite different. Can you tell me more?
Love to, yes. So, This is a ruff. This is something that we associate more with kind of courtly dress, very aristocratic. And here we have Puck wearing a ruff as opposed to Titania and Oberon wearing their Robato collars. And we also here on the cuffs have this gorgeous embroidery, sort of vine motifs and flowers.
So delicate, isn't it?
It is, and that's another really gorgeous throwback to early modern fashion, with having these kind of detailed embroidery on these kinds of places, like on cuffs.
You've mentioned both fantasy and history in the same breath. How far are these real and how far are they imagined costumes?
These are the most fabulous reimagined versions of Elizabethan fashion. They're trying to completely create a new, modern, fantastical version of the Midsummer Night's Dream. We can really kind of go somewhere else with our imagining of that period. And that, I think, is what's so special about them.
At the centre of the plot is another physical transformation. Bottom the Weaver's strange metamorphosis into an ass, complete with giant furry head. I spoke to baritone Brandon Cedel as he met his animal alter ego for the first time. How does it feel?
I mean, it's kind of soft.
It seems like it's much softer than I expected. It's more delicate, isn't it?
It really is. It's kind of cuter than I thought too. I don't know, in pictures I thought it was going to be a little like scary looking, but like, I don't know, if I was the rustics, I wouldn't run away. You know what I mean? I think I'd want to cuddle. Like, maybe Titania's not actually on something. Like maybe it's genuine love.
It's a step up from Oberon and his hair.
Yeah.
And can you remind me, in the plot,
Yes.
how do you end up in this position with this head on you?
So Puck sprinkles a little bit of something on me, and then all of a sudden my head turns into a donkey. And
Quite different reactions from the various characters.
well, they're very different reactions. I mean, the rustics, my friends, they're sitting there and they start screaming and they run away from me, so which is not so kind. And Titania has been sprinkled with another bit of magic on her eyelids, and the first thing that she wakes up and she sees she's supposed to fall in love with, and the first thing she sees is this magnificent head right here. And
How could you not?
really though, I mean, I don't know, I want to like scratch behind its ears, and I want it to like rub up against me, maybe give it a carrot.
It's quite a large sort of headdress. Have you worn anything approaching this before in opera?
No, I mean, I feel like maybe I've worn wigs that are a bit as wild as this donkey's hair is, but never something that completely encloses my face. Actually, except for one other time at Glyndebourne, I was singing in 2019. I was in Ronaldo and I was singing the role of Argante, and he has this chainmail that he wears over his head, which obviously has a face opening. And I wear the chainmail with the face opening for a while, but then I get captured and they turn the chainmail around so you can't see my face anymore. So there's a bit of a history with Glyndebourne wanting to hide my face, I suppose.
Because presumably it's quite challenging to sing with everything covered when you're trying to resonate, you're trying to project.
Totally. The thing that's most difficult, I think, is that it just changes what you're used to hearing, and it changes the sensation of singing. And I think one of the challenges that we as singers face when it comes to wigs and when it comes to props like this is having to adjust to the wig or the prop or the costume or the theater or whatever it is, the staging.
Because you've got it all set up and working beautifully, and then suddenly someone puts that on your shoulder.
That's exactly it, yeah. And it's really overwhelming in the beginning because you think, oh my gosh, this feels so different, and all of a sudden the sound that you're used to hearing or the sensation you're used to hearing feels a little different. And I think kind of the trick is, at least for me, is to try to stay on the path and continue doing what you were doing because it was working up until that point. And then after a week or two, it just feels normal.
And presumably in terms of reactions, once you put that on, your colleagues start reacting to you differently and you can play off that. There must be a real energy.
Yeah, absolutely. It changes everything. I mean, in this case, I think merriment. So
just joy.
Yeah, really.
So you haven't actually put the head on before?
No.
Would you like to?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, come here, you. Look at this. Oh, it's heavy. Oh, look at the ears moving like that. Do you see that? God, it really looks alive.
Very hairy.
Honestly, I'm not kidding. I think he's wearing my Figaro wig from this past season. The sound already, the sound of my speaking voice, I can notice that it's changed from the way it sounds to me in here. So like that sensation is a little different. Hopefully, I have to sneeze. What if I sneeze in here? Do I go like that?
And how does it feel if you give us a bit of a sing in there?
We could do like, so it does sound a little different. I have to say, like, just like on immediately I just hear my sound just feels a little muffled.
It sounds really resonant from here. Are you feeling like you're in a broom cupboard?
No, honestly now, however long it's been, I already feel like I'm getting into it. Do you feel ridiculous that you're having a conversation with me when I look like this? Go ahead, try to conduct me real quick. Let me see if I can do this. Non condrai farfallone amoroso. Hey, you're hired. That's great, right? Should we get a little selfie all together?
In a world of CGI and elaborate cinema special effects, it's easy to forget the power of theatrical illusion. Simple and magical, enchantment that happens right up close and in front of your eyes, Peter Hall's A Midsummer Night's Dream has lost none of its ability to dazzle and beguile. So why not join us this summer and see for yourself?